Welcome into another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Ahmed Gafir and Mason Viner this week, taking a look ahead at the Terps' next opponent, the Michigan State Spartans. And we'll start off on that note, Ahmed. A lot of turmoil in East Lansing this week. Mel Tucker, given not actually fired, but given the intent that the university will fire him, he issued a response to that today. And on to the interim coach the Spartans are.
Yeah, obviously it's I guess you could say the best time to play Michigan State, or it could be the worst especially after losing to Washington 41-7 last week at home. But yeah, obviously, like you said, just a lot of turmoil there, a lot to kind of digest in the program to kind of see what the long term direction is, but whether the short term direction, how that goes. Obviously, I think everyone's kind of looking at this weekend and see whether they can bounce back or not. Potential bounce back and maybe salvage and say, hey, maybe we have something to play for this year, or Maryland if they come out in their first road test and are kind of able to take care of some things, maybe they can send the Spartans spiraling.
Yeah, and let's talk football first when it comes to Michigan State. We'll start off with the offense led by redshirt junior quarterback Noah Kim in his first year starting for the Spartans. Road as of this far up until last week, it looked pretty good in wins over Central Michigan and Richmond.
Yeah, obviously, he's a guy who came from Westfield High School out in Virginia. He was able to kind of generate some momentum in the first 2 weeks, and then obviously kind of ran into a wall there last week. But I think he'll kind of be able to pose a little bit of a threat to Maryland. I think Maryland's done, had some difficulties, especially in contained with some dual threat guys, and Noah, he can use his legs a little bit. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that defense, especially that front seven, they're kind of able to adjust on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, when looking into Michigan State as a whole, it's really kind of a tough team to judge at this point. They came out obviously needing to basically revamp the entire team. I mean, Mel Tucker came in his first year, brought in a ton of guys out of the portal, immediate success. Then last year it went the exact opposite way of that. And one of the keys that all the preview articles talk about, if you go back and read them from the beginning of the season, one, it was quarterback controversy coming into the year. And then second, it was like if they go with Noah Kim, everybody wanting to finally find a guy that can kind of be the long-term fix, or at least 2-3 year fix for Michigan State at quarterback. That's what they're looking at there. And then can they get back to running the ball like they did when they had Kenneth Walker? And that not been the case so far for the Spartans.
Yeah, obviously, like you said, they come into the weekend with the second worst run offense in the Big Ten. Obviously, they're led by Nate Carter there, who ironically still sits third in the Big Ten with just over 90 yards rushing per game. But yeah, like we said, we saw how, what Virginia last week, we kind of expected Virginia's rushing offense to struggle after posting 18 rushing yards on 35 carries, along with 3 TDs against James Madison the week before. And then, early on, Virginia was kind of able to establish some stuff early. So I think, Carter is going to be the name to know in that. And then obviously when you look at Noah Kim, obviously he isn't the most experienced. Obviously Talia would definitely be one of the most experienced, if not the most experienced in the Big Ten. So I think Maryland's kind of going to be able to kind of take advantage of Noah Kim a little bit, maybe get creative with some of their blitz packages, how they, disguising their coverages, things like that. And if they're kind of able to shut down Carter, then you make that Spartan offense one dimensional.
Yeah, and then rounding out the weapons for them, a couple of really good receivers so far this season for Michigan State. They have Mr. Reliable Trey Mosley, who leads the team in receptions but not yards, and then Fitzpatrick, who's a vertical threat for them. But again, when you look at the only opponent that's even close to Maryland's skill set being Washington, who's in the top 10 right now, the table pretty much flipped on this offense. 141 yards passing. I think it was somewhere around 50 yards rushing last week. So as the coach or the interim coach of Michigan State, Harlan Barnett, said today, they got to come out with a much more disciplined approach this week of practice. He already acknowledged, some of the turmoil's kind of eased. They're in life without Mel Tucker at this point. So really kind of a toss-up opponent, but a lot of people really think Maryland's going to take it to Michigan State.
Yeah, I think so. I think the big thing, obviously, you mentioned obviously Fitzpatrick, Glover, and Mosley there. I think the weird thing is that they do combine for one receiving touchdown on the year. Michigan State kind of sits in the middle of the pack so far through the first 3 weeks, obviously, with Washington really bringing that average down. But like you said, I think really this weekend really comes down to and I hate to say it because I know it does sound like a cliche, but it's really versus Maryland on that one. I think if Maryland's really able to kind of execute, and if they're kind of not able to just kind of be the better team, I think kind of that's what everyone is expecting, and I think that's kind of why we saw. I believe the opening line went from Maryland -4 to I think I saw 7.5 now, so definitely swung. So I think I was talking about it actually on Sirius Big Ten Radio. I think just kind of Maryland being able to cover. I think that's kind of the main thing there. But when you look at Michigan State's offense, I think when Virginia's offense, obviously they were able to kind of find some success a week ago. I believe they had a receiver with 9 catches, 150 some yards against Maryland. So the secondary definitely has some work to do. Obviously, Beau Braid will come back this weekend as expected. He was named the game captain as well. So definitely some pieces that Maryland can use to kind of shut down this Spartan offense, and I expect them to. I think this Maryland defense has been able to show enough that on paper again, this defense is better than the Spartans. So we'll see. Like you said, it's a little bit tougher to judge. You never know how to tell. I think it was interesting that Loxley talked about it today at the podium. He took over Maryland back in 2014 when Randy Edsall was fired, and he credited having a bye week to maybe come to terms, compress, and kind of realize right, this is the new situation. And then the following week they had that Penn State game. Michigan State didn't really have that. They lost their coach. They went into that turmoil, and they played one of the top 10 teams in the country. So, like you said, I think that Michigan State, they do have some pieces. Maryland should be able to shut down this Michigan State offense, though.
Yeah, and talking about the Spartans on defense, that's where I think they definitely have some good pieces and have shown it this year. A team with that comes into this week 25 tackles for loss on the season, already has 10 sacks. Not necessarily they haven't forced a ton of turnover, 2 interceptions this year. They've only recovered one fumble, so they forced 3 turnovers on the season so far. But Spartans definitely shown even last year they can still bring it on defense when they were struggling.
Yeah, again, the Jacoby Wyman, he's another guy in that front seven. The Spartans do have that threat. I think it'll be really interesting. We've kind of talked about Maryland's offensive line. What's going to be the dynamic, what kind of looks like the final five. Obviously, got Gottlieb and Yedzi back last week, and he played, both right tackle, right guard. So Maryland hasn't really been shy, obviously, trimming down the rotation from week 1 into week 3. But I think this Michigan State defense and that front seven does pose enough for the threats. And obviously, entering the weekend, sitting second in the Big Ten, they've been able to prove that they're going to be probably Maryland's first real test. And I think this is going to be possibly how Talia responds. I think a lot of people were looking at, Talia has the decision making. Does that take the next step? If Maryland's protection, if it holds up, that's a good sign. But if it doesn't, how does Talia respond? How does the passing game adjust? Does the running game, are they able to maybe adjust and get out in space? Gaddis able to find a little bit ways. So again, I think it all goes back to Michigan State's defense and that front seven, that defensive line, Jacoby Wyman, all these guys really kind of being able to be a factor for them.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Terps on offense here in just a couple of minutes. Last topic on the Michigan State side has to be just a turmoil in situation. We've already you almost can't talk about this team and program in this game without talking about what is going on with Michigan State. Amid rumors circling around over the last week that some players may be opting out, deciding to leave the team, jump ship early for the portal. What do you make of the Michigan State situation? And is it just another symptom of the current landscape of college football?
Yeah, I think obviously, I think kind of like we talked about, just kind of being able to kind of bring everyone together, getting complete buy-in, to completely normal, especially not all that stuff has to be public and whatnot, but for the coaches to kind of be internally dealing with players just having that buy-in. Again, it just kind of goes back to that Michigan State team and kind of really being tough to judge. Obviously, Michigan State, you look back at the summer, they lost two big key pieces in Keon Coleman, Peyton Thorne, back to back essentially, and this offense has really kind of had to adjust. So, not sure that they're going to be able to kind of swallow really many more big departures like that, but it'll be kind of interesting to see what kind of develops into Saturday.
Yeah, just a little bit about the man that will be wearing the number 1 headset for Michigan State. It's Harlan Barnett, former big time safety for Michigan State, spent some time in the NFL, 6 seasons, and he's been around this Michigan State program a long time, not only as a player, but as a coach. He was with the Spartans for 11 years between 2007 and 2018 when he left. The last 2 years he spent as a co defensive coordinator. The rest of the time he was anywhere between a cornerback, safety, and secondary coach under Mark D'Antonio, who will also be on the sideline with him this weekend. Then he headed over to Florida State, where he was the defensive coordinator under Willie Taggart for 2 years. He mentioned in his press conference, which I mean, he just stood on the podium today and took it on the chin. 30-minute press conference for a Tuesday coach in the Big Ten. You don't see that very often. But he talked about that situation, how he was, kind of went through that at Florida State. He was not the interim guy at Florida State, but how he kind of saw that firsthand. And really, a lot of the same things you heard Michael Oxley say when he took over the program at Maryland, especially as an interim guy. He wants to bring, kind of the pride of Michigan State football back, wants his team to play disciplined and really understand that they still have something to play for the university, for the school, and that being his school, obviously putting some emphasis on that. But we really, it'd have to be one heck of a turnaround for Michigan State if they're going to come out and turn a 41-7 absolute beatdown into a win over against a team that's receiving votes in both polls.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's a tall task, and again, that Washington game last week. You watched them. I mean, the first half was just really an onslaught. So I think it's just going to be really interesting. And like you mentioned, just kind of the discipline that he was kind of reinforcing, and just kind of maybe the united front that he's trying to create within that program now, in the midst of all the changes and whatnot. So it's going to be really interesting. Obviously, I think just the biggest thing is obviously Maryland going on the road, but again, this Michigan State defense, I think they do have a couple pieces. Jordan Hall is another guy in that defensive line that I think could kind of be another guy. But again, I think Barnett, just kind of with what he's trying to do there. Again, maybe in that locker room, he's kind of quietly trying to turn the page and say, hey, we put last week behind us. This is Big Ten play now. So again, I think it's going to be very interesting to see especially how that first quarter, how they come out firing.
Yeah, I would think so. And last point on that is really, as a coach right now, you almost in the best interest of your players, whether they're going to stay, whether they're going to leave, whatever the case is. If they're out on the field and they're playing undisciplined football, if they look lazy, if they look disengaged from the program as a whole, that's the first thing that coaches are coming on when those guys do opt to leave or they do opt to stay. Whatever their future holds for them, every game they put on film, every practice they put on film, that's what you're evaluated on in this. And that's something that, can't go without being said if you're trying to do right by your players at this point. Is there's plenty of guys that jump to that portal from a Power 5 team that don't get another opportunity or have to go down a level or whatever the case is. So when you talk about, inspired football, disciplined football, I think there's certainly a lot to sell the players on the Michigan State side. It's just, really if they buy it and what product goes out on the field the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I think part of it, I think obviously it'd be interesting to see what the portal what that would kind of look like. But I also wonder how many of them are like, hey, it's not like I can hit the portal. What's the likelihood that I could transfer to a school back home and play the rest of the season? So you kind of wonder how much that also plays a factor into it. So obviously, like we said, the opt-outs and things like that. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. I think we a lot of Maryland fans kind of looked at this Michigan State game and said, hey, this is going to be that first real test to see what kind of Maryland team that we have this year. And I don't know that it really changes this weekend, because if Maryland's kind of able to take care of business, and this should be they, in my opinion, that they'll be able to cover.
Yeah, let's talk about the Terps. You already mentioned it. Terps versus Terps might be the theme of the day come Saturday, as Locks loves to throw that phrase around, especially this year. But let's start off with the Maryland offense. Leah and company started to kind of get things together against Virginia and look more like themselves. Does that continue come Saturday at 3:30?
Yeah, I think so. I think this Maryland offense, I just kind of think with the skill positions or excuse me, with the skill players that they have, just kind of with Talia back, I think again it goes back to the offensive line. I think that the offensive line it will face its toughest test. I do think that there's going to be some glue moments where Maryland's kind of overloaded, and I think it'll be kind of interesting to see how they kind of adjust. What the second tight end looks like, how the running backs look like. Colby McDonald, he's the guy that was kind of an asset in run protection a week or a year ago. Roman Hemby's been a guy that's taken taken strides over the last year as that run blocker, or excuse me, that pass protector as well. So I think that that'll kind of be the biggest tail there. But I do think that Maryland Skeety's success and path to victory will be through the air.
Yeah, I'll circle a handful of guys that I really think you almost want to step up, or that are going to get the opportunity to step up over the next couple of weeks. But it starts, their real moment, I guess, in the sun starts come Saturday, which is, Ty Felton, Octavian Smith, Tyrese Chambers, guys that necessarily they were in rotations at Chambers at FIU. He was the alpha dog, but now he's in Big Ten football. He's been injured. He's been banged up. What do we see out of him? Then the other two guys, they've been on the field for Maryland last year, but this is really their opportunity. They're trying to break through in this rotation, really show that they are, top of the line Big Ten wide receivers with a big time quarterback. So those kind of guys that haven't necessarily been in that role, maybe they've been on the field, but they weren't looked to make a big play. Those are the guys you're looking to. And you mentioned that second tight end. I think that's a big look. Preston Howard obviously had his big catch and run Friday night against Virginia. Rico Walker's been in different spots. He dropped a couple balls throughout the season so far, but he's also made some bigger plays for Maryland, who kind of eases into those roles now that the lights are on, now that they're on the road. The worst, I think, crowd you can expect from Michigan State Saturday. The weather looks absolutely beautiful in East Lansing, is, between 60 and 70,000. So, it's really going to be a true road environment, probably from some fans that are going to be fired up if Michigan State jumps out like many teams have on Maryland. But those guys, and it goes all the way down to those linemen, Corey Bullock, and company down there, that are really trying to show that they are true Big Ten linemen that have a future in football. This is where that journey starts, and I think the staff needs to make that clear to these guys, and they really have to start to show up and own their roles at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's justified. You mentioned Ty Felton. I think he's a guy. He's had opportunities, and I think he has that big playability where you can really just take the top off. You saw Talia really kind of look at him, leave on one or two deep balls last week. I think fans see it. Like you see that potential there. So it feels like it's just kind of a matter of time before he really does have that big game. But we'll see. Caden Prather, I think he's a guy that's maybe kind of stepped up, and I think against this Michigan State secondary that's kind of struggled a little bit. Charles Brantley is another guy. He kind of got banged up a little bit last week's game. So that kind of factors in as well. But again, I think Maryland's, especially their wide receivers, I just kind of think Deshaun Jones. I could very well see all of these guys finishing with 50, 60 plus rushing yards on Saturday, or excuse me, receiving yards on Saturday. Again, I just think Maryland, if they're kind of able to spread Michigan State's defense out, that's probably the best case scenario. I just think that you stack up Michigan's or Maryland's skill players against that Michigan State secondary, and I just think you mentioned Rico Walker, Preston Howard, Corey Deitch is another guy. We haven't really seen a ton of him since week one, and I'm kind of looking at him to really kind of break out. Be that playmaker that Maryland kind of expects him to be. So it'll be kind of interesting. But again, I just think that Maryland has too many options for Michigan State to slow down.
Yeah, agree with that, especially, skill position matchups. I think the Terps definitely clear advantage over Michigan State secondary. Let's talk about Maryland's defense. Another one, that a group that's, really shined so far this year, in my opinion, when you go back and turn on the tape. Obviously some slow starts. What does Maryland see? And are the Terps still hurting from some injuries in the secondary?
Yeah, I mean, Bo Braid, he was battled injury last week, and I think there was a chance maybe if the game was on Saturday, just that extra day, I could have seen him potentially giving it a shot, but missed Tuesday's practice, and last week since the game was on Friday, Tuesday practice becomes Wednesday, and if you miss Wednesday's practice, that's a little bit tough to kind of make the game there. So I think obviously he is named the game captain. He was out at practice for the opening portion on Tuesday, leading Terp Jack. So again, just kind of think him being named the game captain is kind of indicative of kind of what his status should be for this weekend. But again, I thought Glenn Miller, he did look good last week. I thought he might have looked a little bit better than Dante Trader. Obviously, two different types of safeties, but I think Glenn Miller, just when he's on the field, especially in run support, that tackle that he made at the line of scrimmage midway through the first quarter. I mean, just kind of a perfect example of the type of play that Glenn Miller just kind of really made a habit for in his Maryland career. So I think that, again, Jaquan Shepard, Tarheeb Still was able to bounce back with a pair of interceptions last week. So I think the defense. A lot of fans look at the 14-0 deficits and look at the defense, especially the secondary, because in both games, the secondary there was a breakdown, miscommunication, and that led to the big play. Whether it was the immediate touchdown or a subsequent play, one or two plays later, that's kind of a moot point because the secondary just kind of has that room to grow. So I think both of those guys, they'll we talked about those Michigan State wide receiver trio. I think Tarheeb Still and Shepard will kind of get a chance to redeem themselves. But I think just getting Bo Braid again on that back line, I think it's just kind of huge for the secondary and really puts a confident guy there to kind of lead the unit.
Yeah, a couple things to watch for me this week. It's still that interior defensive line. I know for those of you that watch us on our post game pods here and Tuesday podcasts, you hear me constantly say our interior defensive line really needs to step up and show it. I think this is a team that's going to try and run the ball. Obviously, you're going to have to keep containing against Noah Kim. So still focused on Jordan Phillips, on Tommy Akinbensote, on Chai Johnson, what that rotation really looks like. And if Michigan State starts to get downhill running the ball, who kind of steps up for Maryland in those spots. And then third, it's still a circle, on any depth chart that you try and make of this team right now. Who is that nickel corner of, of this team? Who's going to own that role? I really liked what they did with Gavin Gibson and Tarheeb Still last week. Obviously, Corey Coley's still in the mix. There's been plenty of guys run through in that position at this point, but Gavin Gibson 1 week better. I think that he really is. Maybe he's not a nickel guy, but as a boundary guy and still can go play the nickel, I think that is probably the best case for the Terps.
Yeah, I mean, I remember early last week there were a couple plays, consecutive plays where Colin Wyatt made, and then I think later in the game, Gavin Gibson, consecutive plays where he really got my eye. I think he's going to be a really good piece as well. And Jaheim Still, I think he's going to be a guy where he kind of factors in there as well. Vontae Williams, we haven't really seen him too much yet. Just when he kind of immerses himself into that rotation, kind of remains to be seen. But you mentioned, the interior defensive line and kind of needing the Jordan Phillips, Tommy Akinbensote, Chai Johnson to step up. Especially in those short yardage situations. We've seen Michigan State. We talked about how they kind of struggled to establish the run, and obviously, Loxley, if you ask that, he'll say, Michigan State, they're going to put an emphasis on improving the run so that they can kind of build on that this weekend. But those short yardage situations, look at a guy like Drake Colbert, who really fills the role of Henry Tribuzzi a year ago, where he was kind of in the rotation, but kind of was that fourth lineman in those third and ones or those goal line packages. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how frequently he's kind of able to crack in more. And Isaac Bunyan, he was a guy who was limited last week after he went down as well. His status was a little bit unclear during Tuesday's practice, so whether he's available against Michigan State remains to be seen. And I think that's maybe a guy that kind of gets overlooked, but he plays a lot as well. So it'll be kind of interesting to see if Goldberg is able to step up there.
Yeah, so a couple things to watch for the Terps defense. They certainly will take a road test against Michigan State. Let's take a look around the conference. Big Ten play getting going Friday night. Well, not really getting going, obviously. That now they have to throw a week 1 game in there, but in full swing. There's the right word for it. This week, starting on Friday, Friday night FS1 spot that the Terps had last week goes to Wisconsin and Purdue this week.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. I kind of like Purdue in this one. I feel like just Wisconsin's just hasn't looked. They've just looked a little bit shaky to start the year, which maybe is a little bit expected in year 1, but just not sure that I'm ready to ride with them on the road just yet. Kind of wait and see mode. So definitely Friday Night Lights will be a fun one.
Yeah, Badgers 6-point favorite. I really like Hudson Card and that Purdue team. Still struggling from, I guess, Purdue football syndrome, where they just look like they're going to win and then just find a way to not win. But elsewhere around the conference, Rutgers heads to Michigan. Michigan 24-point favorite. I don't know how after watching this Rutgers team you could really think that they're going to lose to Michigan on the road by 24. But I guess Michigan out to prove themselves. Don't want another early season scare like they had last year against Maryland.
Yeah, I think it'll be kind of interesting. Obviously, this will be the first game with Harbaugh back on the sidelines as well. Rutgers, opening, I think they opened as a touchdown favorite against Virginia Tech and ended up covering it. Virginia Tech looks awful this year. Rutgers, they do look improved. I don't know that, I could see Michigan kind of maybe pulling away. I could see it being maybe a 7-10 point game at halftime. I just think kind of Harbaugh back, Big Ten opener at home. I think Michigan will eventually end up covering in this one. And JJ McCarthy kind of struggled last week, so I could see him trying to, a little chip on his shoulder going into this one.
Yeah, two other big games in the conference, both at night this week. Ohio State heads to the return trip to Notre Dame. Buckeyes 3-point favorite in South Bend. I really love this Sam Hartman Notre Dame team, though.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by this Kyle McCord offense led by at Ohio State. I think it'll be just really interesting to see. Obviously, going into Notre Dame, a hostile environment. It's going to be his first real big test. It's kind of hard to kind of pick against him. Obviously, same higher, just kind of with the experience. I think that might be the factor that kind of tilts it in their favor. But I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of how McCord adjusts there. I think that kind of will kind of really set the standard and kind of maybe set the bar for who will really be the Big Ten leader with the starter conference play.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like we saw that classic Ohio State football moment where they look a little bit slow. They play that first game against Indiana, they don't look good. Then they come out the next week and they kind of look a little shaky. And then somewhere in that second quarter, I think the score went from like 20-10 to 42-10 in 8 minutes in the second quarter against Western Kentucky this last weekend. So now what goes on from there? Who knows? I mean, it seems like every year Ohio State, everyone's like they're finally slow. They don't have a quarterback, whatever the case is, and suddenly somewhere in those first couple of non-conference games, they find the guy, and then they just never look back. Now, Notre Dame's a tough test for them. I think that Notre Dame's gonna be looking back on last year, where I think they were kind of embarrassed in the horseshoe and ready to go. And Sam Hartman at this point looks like he's a real Heisman contender. 13 touchdowns, no interceptions, I believe he's over 1,000 yards already passing on the season. I like the Irish, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State looks like Ohio State. They just don't have quite enough yet with the young quarterback in there.
Yeah, I just think I just think the Irish will be able to just kind of throw McCord kind of off his off his rhythm a little bit. Just kind of in wait and see mode with that offense. But yeah, I'm kind of inclined to lean on Notre Dame there, but I never put my money on Notre Dame.
Last one before we talk about the Terps. Whiteout this week in Happy Valley. Iowa heads in. Hawkeyes 14.5 point underdog going up against Penn State. I like the Cade McNamara Iowa team. They've been doing me well in my picks this year so far. So I lean with the Hawks. I always love this game. Iowa going into Penn State for the Whiteouts. Just such a traditional Big Ten game.
Yeah, it definitely is. I think it'll be just a really good atmosphere. I think this Penn State defense. I think it'll be kind of really interesting to see what they're able to do against Kate McNamara there. I think 14 and a half. I could see Penn State being able to cover that. I could see it maybe being a 10 point game at halftime, and Penn State maybe kind of running away with it in the second half. Just not as sold on this Iowa offense just yet. And I think this Penn State defense just has a lot of pieces in the front seven, and then in the secondary, they've got a couple really quality pieces, future NFL talent as well. I think Penn State's gonna cruise in this one, honestly.
Yeah, and I think that just in general Big Ten talk, this is the game that I think Iowa has to have circled for Brian Ferentz and the
Yeah.
offense, and possibly Kirk Ferentz and everything that he's done for that program, but it's just not working anymore. And last week you started to see the flashes of it after a great Cyhawk win for Iowa earlier this year. It's just starting to look again like they're just running the ball. They're looking for play action. They're looking for the tight ends. Now, however, me saying that, I'm just going to take Iowa in the 14 and a half. I do think that their defense is equally as Iowa classic good with Parker as the defensive coordinator. I think they're going to be able to get in Drew Eller's face. I think they're going to be able to make the game close. Now, they may lose it, somewhere around the lines of 24-3. That wouldn't surprise me. But for some reason, this game always goes down to the wire. It doesn't really matter if, going back a couple years to when Sean Clifford got hurt at Iowa. The great game that Saquon Barkley, Penn State scored on the last play of the game to win. These two teams find ways to play great games at night on wherever the game is. So I don't think that really changes this year, but would not be surprised if Penn State pulls it out, just not by 14 and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's justified. I just think, um, I think I'm pretty bullish just on what Penn State, especially with the running back tandem with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. I don't know. I think Penn State just. I know Maryland fans hate to say it, but I think, excuse me, hate to hear it, but I think Penn State just kind of has the makeup to kind of maybe disrupt some of these Big Ten elite there with Michigan and Ohio State, obviously. So we'll see. Obviously, whiteout games always, an electric atmosphere. So it'll be kind of interesting to see, how Penn State kind of adjusts. Obviously, they were able to kind of take care of Illinois last week. Kind of hung around in the first half a little bit, went into the locker room 16-7 lead. So we'll see. Obviously, it will be like we talked about with Kyle McCord over at Ohio State. This is going to be Drew Aller's really his big first test, and kind of gets the benefit of the doubt a little bit just with it being at home.
And that also kicks off the Big Ten's night games on CBS for those of you that are paying attention to the new TV deal the Big Ten has. The Terps, let's talk about this. Probably one of the spreads that's moved the most in the country up to this point. Consensus, anywhere you look, between 4.5 and 5.5 point open. Maryland favored in that. Now the consensus 7.5. Looking around, that's where the number is everywhere at this point. Maryland a 7.5 point favorite. Ahmed, uh, do you see the Maryland taking it and laying the points?
Yeah, I actually, full disclosure, I do have Maryland 6.5 already locked in. The line was moving so fast, and I said, you know what, within a touchdown, I think they'll be able to do that. And you know what, I think if Maryland, I also do think if they cover, I kind of said it earlier a little bit, but I think if they cover, that's kind of also proof of, I want to say, a successful, first road win in the Big Ten this year. Because I think if you're able to win by at least 7 in Michigan State, again, this is a Michigan State team, especially with the start of Big Ten play. They're getting punched in the mouth last week against Washington, humiliated in that first game. Yeah, I do kind of expect them to, maybe come out maybe a little bit energized. So I think Maryland coming out to that fast start, I think being able to sustain that for 60 minutes. Again, I think Maryland is the better team on paper. I think this Maryland offense will be able to score and find the holes in this Michigan State defense, the secondary. I think Maryland's defense, especially that front seven, especially off the edge, Kellen Wyatt's been able to flash. Donnell Brown, he's, it's kind of hard to miss him when he's on the field, I think. But I just think there's the pieces to kind of make this offense, the Michigan State offense, a little bit one dimensional. So I do think that Maryland can cover. Now, again, it's first road game, especially in the Big Ten. Winning on the road is hard, especially in the Big Ten. So, I do definitely expect Maryland to win this, but I do already have my money where my mouth is, and 6.5, I have comfortably. 7.5, that's that extra point there. So not sure that I'll move in on that one just yet, but I do think that Maryland will be able to 6.5. They will be able to get.
No, at 6.5, I dropped the topic over and inside the black and gold. And the consensus, Ahmed, was pretty much what you just laid out for
Yeah.
us, which is it's clear Vegas is always, they always know. They have just the best beat and insider look on sports. And when you start to see the line move, that means there's big money flowing on Maryland. That means that there's a lot of confidence in Maryland. And I'll have to go with that. I would take Maryland still at 7.5. I just did not really like what I heard from the Michigan State media coverage this week. Didn't really like what I heard necessarily from the questions in the press conference. Now, when coaches change, I'm always one of those people that thinks you either go way up, like team gets amped up, gets ready to go, and immediately shows out better than they were before, or you see the other side of that, which is things go downhill and they go downhill in a hurry. I think that's where Michigan State is at the moment. I think Maryland wins. Actually, I think Maryland wins and they win big this week. I think the Terps just are able to kind of pour it on. Michael Penix threw for like 375 and 4 touchdowns. I don't think Leah's having quite the year that Michael Penix is having, but the Terps definitely have wide receivers akin to what Washington's got on their roster. I think Maryland rolls big in this one. I'll take it Terps 34-17.
Yeah, I think that's valid. Definitely, I mean, Talio recorded his 13th career 300-yard passing game last week. I could definitely envision a 14, or excuse me, number 14 this weekend as well. So yeah, I mean, again, I think Maryland's going to get it. I think just kind of with them. Again, I just think, again, we talked about it, but it's Terps versus Terps, and I think if this Maryland team is the team that we've heard about all off season, then it shows up on Saturday.
Yeah, a couple quick props on this one. Terps points 30.5 is the number for Maryland. I already gave my score prediction of 34, so I'm on the over side of it. Ahmed, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm leaning actually right over. I've kind of landed on 31 right there. So I do think it's going to hit. I just think again, I have a lot of confidence in this passing attack.
Same question on the MSU side. Michigan State 21.5, the number for Michigan State's offense.
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually gonna, circle back on that 7.5 now, and I think I've convinced myself on it because I don't think Michigan State's gonna be able to score 2+ touchdowns. So on 20.5, I'm gonna take the under on that. I just think, especially like we kind of talked about it earlier in the show, but just Maryland's defense, last year, much was made of the first to second half adjustments, and now it's kind of, you go to those 14 hole deficits. How quickly can they adjust? And the defensive staff has a lot of really bright minds. Obviously, Brian Williams is getting a lot of praise, but Lance Thompson, he's a really good guy. Zach Spavital does really well. Henry Baker, all the secondary guys that went into the NFL the last couple of years. Baker's played a really big part in there. So I think it's kind of a testament to all of these guys kind of really being able to find those adjustments. So I just don't know that Michigan State does have that firepower to be able to kind of find sustained success. So yeah, Michigan State under the 20.5. Yeah, I like that.
And last one, I got to throw it out there. It's my least favorite thing in sports betting, the over under on the game. 53.5 is the consensus right now, according to Action Network. It's anywhere between 52 on DraftKings right now and 54 some places. That's a real tough one. I mean, my score prediction would indicate that I guess I'm on the underside of it right now, and I'll stick with that.
Yeah, I'm under just because I'm not confident that Michigan State will be able to put enough. I could see. I mean, like I said, I have Maryland at 31 points, low 30s. It's kind of that range where kind of feel pretty comfortable at. But I'm not sure Michigan State will be able to produce 17 plus, 20 plus. Just not confident in that, and really more confident in this Maryland defense.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more going into Michigan State. So Ahmed and I both pretty much have the same game picked out for the Terps, which is a win over Michigan State. We'll be back here on the pod post game. I don't think either of us are making the trip this week to East Lansing. I definitely looked at it, I think 3 times this week, but decided to sit this one out. I have Michigan State, one of the few places in the Big Ten I've not been to yet, but we'll have coverage here post game. Make sure to keep up with the game thread and subscribe to Inside the Black and Gold for all the Insider Terps coverage that you could want in this world. And Ahmed sure has a lot of it over there on Inside the Black and Gold. For Mason Viner and Ahmed Gafir, as always, like, comment, subscribe on the podcast. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.